The hiring process, best practices for recruitment and retention. The goals of our training are to help departments determine their needs, help them select ideal candidates, and keeping the employees you have. Remember, retention starts with recruitment. What is the function of HR recruitment? Well, we're here to help you find and hire people to fill openings within Baylor. We help with recruitment strategy, sourcing, interviewing, guiding managers and departments on best practice, and developing and maintaining a recruitment brand. This is the current recruitment team. We have a manager, 4 senior recruiters, and 2 staff recruiters. We're all divided by department, and so depending on your department will depend on which recruiter you are assigned to. One of the most important things is partnering with your recruiters. So discussing the position, including selection criteria and recruitment strategy, providing feedback throughout the process, especially if you're not receiving the quantity or quality of applicants you need, and discussing interview strategies and the selection process. We're here to help. August of 2019, Baylor transitioned to SuccessFactors, so we wanted to go over some common definitions, some of them different than what were used previously at Baylor. So one of them is division versus department. So division is the academic unit or central unit that describes the main function of the department. And department is the name given to the specific section under a division, formerly known as the organization unit. Usually employees reside at the department level. Position is something that happens in the position org chart or position management of SuccessFactors, and it represents what the department is requesting. A job requisition is associated with the recruiting module. So this is what your recruiter will mostly be working with. Job profile, that defines a job description. That's the qualifications, duties, certifications. The job profiles in SuccessFactors are managed by our compensation department. A posting is just a job posting, which is an advertisement that we use to attract applicants. We can post internally and externally on our own website, as well as through other websites and career portals. So we'll go over that more later. Offer approval, the form the HRC or HR coordinator fills out to obtain a salary review from compensation. So that's all in SuccessFactors. You don't have to email back and forth. It is all processed through SuccessFactors, which is really efficient. We just wanted you to be able to see what life of a position is in SuccessFactors and when does the recruiter get involved. So the department will submit the position through position management. It'll go to budget, mission leadership, then it'll be approved. The department is notified that it's approved, usually the HRC or the HR coordinator that I mentioned. From there, with an approved position, then the department or the HRC has to create a requisition. And when they create that requisition, it goes to the recruiter assigned to that department. And that's the first time that the recruiter is involved in the process. So we have to clean up that position, get it ready for posting, and make sure that everything is needed, and then get it posted. Right now, positions are approved and expire after 4 months or 120 days, and they're only posted for 3 months or 90 days. There obviously are reasons for extension, hard to fill positions, or positions that generally take longer, like postdocs. And so as long as there's a good business reason why it should be extended, then that should not be a problem. If it's an entry-level position for which there's been ample applicant flow, then usually that does not merit an extension. Determining your ideal position. So you'll want to work with your recruiter and compensation analyst prior to submitting that position in the position org chart. So say you just got some new grant funding, you can't decide if you want to hire a research nurse or a research coordinator. The grant allows you to do either. And so you can talk with your recruiter about what that might look like. You can talk with a comp analyst in terms of what kind of salary you would pay different level of individuals, and then you can come up with a decision of which one fits better. The recruiter can help you get a better understanding of applicant flow for the different titles. So again, if you're using the research nurse and research coordinator example, it could be a time where we're not having a lot of experienced research nurses applying, but we have a high volume of research coordinators with experience applying. And so if you're looking to fill it fast, then we might suggest that you go the research coordinator path. You can also look at the job information in the job profile builder. That will give you a list of the minimum education and experience and any licensure or certification required for that position. It'll also give you an idea of just the basic duties for that title. So sometimes that's helpful if you're just not familiar with those titles. Job descriptions versus job postings. So like I said, a job description is located in Job Profile Builder. That is managed by our compensation team. They're very generic. They serve an internal function, just a legal purpose, if you will. These are the minimum qualifications to be in that role. There's a salary range associated with it, so we're not paying people less than the salary range or higher than the salary range. It's really meant for internal audience, so people at Baylor. A job posting is very specific to the role and the department, and the point of the job posting is kind of like an advertisement where we're trying to attract targeted applicants, and it will have a very targeted salary. It will have your budgeted salary amount. And so usually when we're using the salary in job postings, we'll post the minimum and the pay grade up to the budgeted amount, which oftentimes is midpoint. Posting best practices. So we want to have a really robust job posting that gives applicants an accurate description of the role and the department so that it makes it inviting. Like, oh, I think I would like to apply for that position. So you want to give them just enough information to entice them to apply, but not give them so much information that they get bored with reading the posting. So we encourage you to include a few sentences about the position. If it's research, you definitely want to include information about the research that you're doing. If it's clinical, you want to include patient population, but just anything about your department. And it doesn't have to be long. Like I said, a few sentences. You definitely want to include a brief summary about the role, how it fits into the department. Include a list of several job duties and responsibilities. Again, you're going to have those standard ones from the job profile, but there are times where some of them aren't applicable. So maybe there's 7 job duties on the job profile, but 2 of them really aren't applicable to your job. So let's remove those and get those out of there. And if you have other job duties that needed to be added, then definitely want to add them. The minimum education and experience licensure, like I said, that is set by compensation. That's not going to change. That's going to be on the job posting. But you do have the opportunity to add preferred qualifications. So if the job requires a bachelor's degree, but you'd really like somebody with a master's, we can put that in the preferred qualification section. You can also include working conditions information, physical requirements, physical risk, very common for clinical positions and even some facilities positions, but we can definitely add that if it's applicable for your position. So when you're thinking about posting best practices, you want to think about why would someone want this job? So department highlights, website, reason for opening, is it growth and expansion? If the reason you have an opening because you have high turnover, definitely don't want to include that. But if it's because you're growing, you have grant funding, you're expanding, you've recruited a world-renowned researcher and they're building up their lab, those are the kind of things that we want to include on there, especially flexible work hours or schedule. If that's something that you can have available to new employees, state-of-the-art facilities, any of these things that might make someone interested in your position. This is just a sample of a solid job posting information. So a little bit about the job purpose, the job duties, and the minimum qualifications. You can see that the salary range is on there. So that's just what a standard job posting looks like in SuccessFactors. So I mentioned earlier that we have the opportunity for external advertising. So there are certain things where Baylor pays, an annual fee, and we can, post jobs unlimited. So that would apply to the Chronicles of Higher Ed and postdoc jobs. So they're scraping our site, which is they come in and they take the jobs that we have posted at jobs.bcm.edu and they get them posted on their site. So it's really great because it's not a manual process. Indeed also has that same scraping feature, but they scrape whatever jobs they want. So we don't pay them to do that. And so we don't have a lot of oversight on what they can take. But if we have an opening at jobs.bcm.edu, then Indeed can take it and put it on their site and give us more visibility. LinkedIn, we do pay for a certain number of slots to post jobs on. It's very few because it's a very expensive site. So we're really careful about what we put on there, make sure that it's strategic and makes good business sense. You wouldn't put a research tech entry-level job on LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that you're talking with your recruiter and listening to their expertise on what jobs are appropriate for LinkedIn and which ones aren't. And then we have CareerArc, which is a social media advertising that we use, and they have a lot of algorithms that they use, but we pay for them annually, and they're posting jobs that are appropriate out to specific social media for the role. You might also have external advertising that you'd like to do, maybe at a niche site that is very specific to your kind of department or lab or specialty. So when you talk with your recruiter about, hey, this is the ad I'd like to use, these are just some things that they're going to make sure are on there. So when you have something that you want to advertise, whether it's in print or whether it's an online advertisement, you would just reach out to your recruiter to get it approved. So once you've done all this great advertising and you're starting to get applications, we just want to go over what the purpose of the application is and reviewing the application. So obviously the application fulfills a legal purpose. There's lots of questions that we cannot ask due to equal employment laws. But some points of interest on the application that you'll want to look at is work authorization. If you have the luxury to wait for an H-1B to process, then absolutely. If you find the perfect candidate and they need H-1B, no problem. But if you need to fill a position fast, then you obviously want to be looking at H-1B and deciding whether you really have the time to wait for that kind of work authorization to process. You want to make sure that they have the right certification, education, work experience, all of that, you'll want to be looking at and vetting whether that is the right fit for your role or not. And then also answers to supplemental questions. So when your recruiter is posting your requisition, they have the chance to add some additional questions. And that just helps to get a better feel for the applicants. So it can be as much as asking them about specific lab experience or lab skills that they may or may not have and their level of experience with that. And so you can talk with your recruiter early on before that rec is posted to make sure that there's supplemental questions are added that would be beneficial to you as you review applicants. Once you get into SuccessFactors and you're reviewing the actual applications, then you have lots of options to be able to sort them. So the first category that the recruiter is going to move them to is department review. And from there, when you get in and see the applicants in department review, you can move them to different subcategories. So within department review, there's a tier 1 and a tier 2. So if you want to leave department review for just those new applicants that the recruiters moved over that you haven't looked at yet, and then tier 1 would be people that you've moved to that category because they're a top candidate. Tier 2 might be people that you might be interested, but maybe they don't have everything that you're looking for. And then there's also the category of pursuing other candidates, which means you already know that you're not interested in considering that applicant, so you can go ahead and move them to that category. Once you've began looking at your applicants, then you can start moving them to department interviews. So if you know you want to start with a video or phone screen, and then once you're done there, you can move them to first interview or second interview. So it's just a way for you to keep track of where your applicants are in the applicant flow. Once you decide it's time to start interviewing, then you need to decide on an overall process and format. So are you going to start with phone interviews? Are you going to do individual versus group? Are you going to do multiple interviews? So it's really important to keep consistent for all candidates being considered. So you can definitely talk with your recruiter about ideas, suggestions, best practices. They can help you with interview question development, but you want to have that in place before you start any interviews. I'm a firm believer in phone interviews, and we'll talk more about them, but I think it's a great way to spend just a few minutes talking with someone, making sure they have the key things that you're looking for in an applicant that would be successful in this role before you spend a lot of time bringing them in for in-person interviews. A phone interview is a great time to assess communication skills, professionalism, demeanor and attitude, really level of interest and position. And you think, well, they applied, aren't they interested? Well, sure, but maybe they applied a month ago when they had a really bad day at work and now work's going great. So maybe they're less interested. So just having a nice quick phone interview can really give you a better feel of how strong a candidate they are for you. If you have specific work hours, then this is definitely a chance to ask them if they're available for the hours that you need. If you have any red flags or concerns, then you can definitely talk with your recruiter about them. So preparing for that interview, whether it's phone or in person, make sure that you review the resume and application. Make sure that you have a list of questions. Make sure all your interviewers are prepared and coordinate your questions. So you don't want to ask the same 10 questions, having 4 different interviewers ask the same 10 questions. It's okay if there's some overlap because that's just validating that they're giving a true answer and not what they think the interviewer would want to hear. But you'll want to kind of say, hey, why don't you ask this group of questions? We'll ask these. And so there's just some coordination with those efforts. During the interview, candidate impressions, first impressions count. You represent Baylor. So limit distractions, set aside a quiet place to talk, allow enough time not to rush, listen 80% of the time, and definitely monitor your nonverbal communication. This is especially important if you know that you're not really interested in that applicant. You can kind of start crossing your arms, looking at your watch, wondering when this is going to be over. And so it's just important that, they might not be a good fit for you, but they could be a fit for someone else at Baylor. So we want them to have a positive experience. It's totally okay for you to take notes. Tell the candidates you're using specific questions and inform them you're taking notes. Make sure your notes are skills, qualification, job related. Notes are discoverable. So what does that mean? It means that if someone said, hey, I was asked inappropriate interview questions during this interview, then during the legal investigation, someone could come and ask for your notes. So it's really important that you keep them very professional and skills, qualification, job related. When you start your interview, you want to establish rapport. Sometimes people are really nervous when they come in for an interview. So you might even start with, did you have any trouble finding us today? Or what a beautiful day it is outside. Or I hope you didn't get caught in that rain shower. It just kind of puts them at ease. That's an easy question that they can answer. You want to take and keep control of the interview. Like I said, people are nervous when they come for an interview, so sometimes they can get long-winded in their answers. Sometimes they can forget what question you asked them, and then they keep talking, hoping that eventually they will answer the question. So at some point you might need to say, I think we're done with that question. Let's move on to the next, if you feel like they're kind of going on a tangent. Treat all applicants in the same manner and ask the same qualification-centered questions. Ensure all candidates have a positive and professional experience. And definitely discuss salary expectations to avoid surprises later in the process. Now, this isn't promising them a salary. You might not even mention what kind of salary budget you have. You're just asking them what kind of salary they're desiring for this role. And then in your mind, you can be evaluating whether that fits within the range you have budgeted. So there's lots of different kinds of interview questions out there. All questions should be looking at performance-based or candidate success profile. What competencies drive exceptional job performance, and develop questions around these. Also, hiring to the Baylor work culture. So we'll look at 4 different types of specific interviewing questions: neutral, open-ended, non-threatening, and behavioral. Neutral would be you don't want to lead them with the question. So you don't want to give them the answer. Would you be available to travel 3 days a week? Because they're thinking, well, I really want this job. They obviously want me to travel 3 days a week. Why, yes, I can. So rather, you would ask them, how much travel would you like to have in the job? How much travel would be too much? How much travel do you have in your current job? So this will give you a better answer rather than just telling you what they think you want to hear. Open-ended questions are questions that make the candidate talk. So you want to craft questions around problems, responsibilities, tasks similar to those encountered on this particular job. This is the what, the how, the tell me about, and describe. Non-threatening questions. Why do you change jobs so often? right away they are thinking, oh my gosh, they think I change jobs so often. They might get even more nervous. So instead, you can ask, for your last 2 jobs, please tell me why you took them and why you left them. This just gives you the real answer of why someone took a job and why they left. Behavioral interview questions can be really helpful because past behavior is a predictor of future behavior. So you're asking them to tell you about a time when a specific example happened, or describe a situation when and where. Give me an example of when. But there is a population that this doesn't work well with, and that's new graduates, someone that may not have much work experience. And so you might have to do a situational interview with them where you paint out the situation and ask them how they think they would respond. Now, this isn't a true indicator of how they actually would respond because they haven't been in that situation before, but it will help you understand their critical thinking skills and what answers they might come up with. So we went over all the questions and things to ask, but what about what not to ask? So obviously there's a legal aspect of interviewing. Things to not ask are marital status. That includes, wow, what a beautiful ring you have on your hand. So I know that seems innocent, but really don't comment because it is acknowledging possibly that you recognize that they're married, and whether that might go into your decision about whether you hire them or not. Childbearing plans or childcare. That includes someone that says, I'm so sorry I was late for my interview. My nanny didn't show. My child's sick. Whatever the circumstances, it's just best to move on and actually not acknowledge that and just say, I'm glad you're here now. Let's get started. Don't use that as an opportunity to probe more on how old their children are or their childcare arrangements. Finances, military discharge. You can ask what someone did in the military. You can ask what their role was, but we don't ask about their discharge status, whether it was honorable or medical. And it really equates to asking about a disability potentially. And so we just steer clear of that. So ask them about what they did in the military, how long they were in the military. But beyond that, we don't ask them about their discharge status. Arrest records, leave that to your recruiter. If they bring that up or you notice it, definitely talk with your recruiter about it. Or if they bring it up, refer them to the recruiter to share that information if they have any questions. It's just best that that's not part of the interview. Labor unions, political party. We don't ask for photographs, height, weight, country of origin. All of that could lead to questionable interviewing and hiring practices. And maiden name, which again might seem very innocent, but if they feel like that they were not hired because of where their culture or where their name, where their ethnicity, then that could be, a bad situation. So it's best to just steer clear of that. Keep your interview based on their education, their work experience. So after you're done asking all of your questions, it's really important that you allow time for the candidate to ask questions. Don't promise them a job during that interview, no matter how great the interview went. Give them information about the interview process time frame. Are they the first person that you've interviewed and over the next 3 weeks you have many more interviews to go and they're not going to hear back till then? Or are they the last in your interview process and they may hear back relatively soon? Just be upfront and transparent with them on when they might hear back. Explain the process for post-interview questions. It's inevitable that they're going to leave and they're going to think, oh, I wish I would have asked this, but they won't know who to reach out to. This can be an admin person or it can be one of the people in the interview committee. Provide information about benefits and parking. This is a really great time to loop in your recruiter. They can share that information and talk more about that info with the candidate. And always thank them for their time, whether they're a top notch in your book or not, or maybe not even selected for your role. They've taken time out of their life, whether that's a day off from work or just a day away. Thank them for the time that they've spent with you. Again, they might not be a fit for you, but they might be fit for another position at Baylor. So we want them to have a positive experience. Say they are the perfect candidate. They passed all the interviews. Everyone thinks they're great. You're ready to figure out, what do we do from here? So if you want to conduct reference checks, then this would be a great time to do that. So you would email your candidate, let them know they are a finalist for your position, or just let them know that you're at the point where you'd like to check references. Ask them for 3 professional references. Usually I do it via email so that you have that in writing of their consent for you to contact their references. And you're looking for people that they've worked with, people that might have worked for them if they're in a management position, or a manager or supervisor that they've had in the past or present. In SuccessFactors, you'll want to move them to the finalist identified status. And when you do that, your recruiter will receive an auto-generated email. So it lets them know, hey, you can stop sending the applicants for this rec because a finalist has been identified. So that's just really helpful for us to streamline our process and be able to pay more attention to another position that doesn't have a finalist. If they're a candidate that needs a visa, then you'll want to move them to the ISO status or disposition in SuccessFactors. That will send an auto-generated email to the ISO team and to recruitment. From that, you can reach out to ISO to provide them additional information that they'll need in order to evaluate what type of visa or whether that candidate qualifies for a visa for that title. When you're ready to figure out salary, that's when you'll submit that offer approval, formerly known as a salary recommendation. And usually, like I said before, the HRC often does this, but it really depends on your department's process. But once that offer approval form is filled out, it's sent over through SuccessFactors to compensation, and there could be back and forth between comp and on that offer approval. Once it's all approved, it'll come to the recruiter with full approval to go ahead and extend that verbal offer. Once it's accepted and we set that start date, then we go ahead and get that offer letter sent. We can initiate a background check. We process that hire in SuccessFactors, and that'll close out that requisition and get them flowing over to the onboarding module. Remember, you want to set them up for success. So as their orientation date nears and as they're planning to start with you, make sure you have a plan. Provide them that departmental orientation. Be prepared for them to be in work with you. Maybe even consider including current employees in putting together the orientation. And then set very clear expectations of them. This is what we expect of you this week, this month, first 3 months, and that way they know what's expected and what goals they have. Right now, Baylor orientation is on Mondays and Wednesdays. Mondays are centralized and Wednesdays are self-guided. If you want to know more about what that entails, then definitely reach out to your recruiter or the orientation team and they can help more with that. As you have employees, whether it's a new employee or employee that's been with you for a while, you want to provide continuous and ongoing feedback. Learning how to have those difficult conversations and provide constructive criticism. Have those conversations in private and validate and encourage employees when they do something correctly. And don't give up too easily. It's probably taken you a while to find this position. And sometimes it's easier to train them on a new skill or a software that they are lacking experience with than to start the recruiting process all over again. Retention and turnover starts with recruitment. I said that at the beginning of the presentation too. When you're interviewing applicants for a position, be clear regarding what's expected in terms of work hours and location. Don't promise things just to get them to take the job. Find out the real reason your employees are leaving. Maybe even consider doing a SWOT analysis. And definitely attach a dollar amount to your turnover costs. It can be pretty eye-opening. If you have any questions about today's presentation, feel free to email askrecruitment@bcm.edu or reach out to your department's recruiter. Be happy to help and answer any questions that you have.